The massive doors opened with a sound like breaking ice. Sarah Chen stepped into the council chamber and felt 47 different species turn to look at her. Some had eyes. Some had sensors. Some had ways of seeing that humans didn't even have names for. But they were all watching her now. The chamber was enormous. It stretched up so high that clouds formed near the ceiling. The walls were made of something that looked like crystal, but felt alive when Sarah had touched it earlier. Each of the 47 species had their own section, designed for their specific needs. The Valkyrie floated in tanks of liquid methane. The Threshold Collective pulsed with electric light in their containment fields. The Mnemosynes existed as a shared consciousness spread across 1,000 bodies that moved as one. Sarah walked forward. Her boots clicked on the floor. Each step echoed. She was alone in the center of the chamber, and she had never felt so small in her entire life. She wasn't supposed to be here. Ambassador Joe was supposed to stand in this spot. He had trained for 30 years for this moment. He knew all the protocols. He spoke 6 alien languages fluently. He had prepared a beautiful speech about humanity's readiness to join the galactic community, but Ambassador Joe was dead. The transport had exploded 3 days ago. 17 people died in that explosion. Sarah survived because she had been in the cargo bay, checking on the cultural gifts they were bringing to the council. When she woke up in the medical station, she learned that she was now Earth's only representative. The mission would proceed with her, or it would not proceed at all. High Arbiter Thexanol sat at the center of the chamber. He was old, so old that his crystalline body had turned nearly black with age. He had led the council for 2,000 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had made decisions that shaped the entire galaxy. He looked at Sarah the way someone might look at a bug that had crawled onto their dinner plate. "The human may speak," Thexanol said. His voice came through the translation device in Sarah's ear. It sounded cold and formal. "You have 1 standard cycle to present your species petition for membership. We suggest you be brief." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The Valkyrie made bubbling sounds in their tanks. The insectoid Kresh clicked their mandibles together. The Threshold Collective flashed in patterns that Sarah's implant translated as amusement. They thought this was funny. They thought she was funny. Sarah had studied the Council's history during the 3-day journey here. She knew that humanity had been trying to join for 300 years. Every 50 years, Earth sent a new delegation. Every 50 years, the Council found a reason to say no. Humanity was too young, too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be trusted with the responsibilities of galactic citizenship. She had Ambassador Joe's speech loaded on her datapad. She had practiced it 100 times. It was full of carefully chosen words about peace and cooperation and humanity's desire to learn from older, wiser species. It was humble and respectful, and exactly what the Council wanted to hear. Sarah took a breath and started reading. She talked about Earth's achievements. She mentioned the art, the music, the literature that humanity had created. She spoke about the scientists and philosophers and teachers who had shaped human civilization. She explained how humans had learned to work together, to build cities and nations, and eventually a unified planetary government. 3 minutes into her speech, Counselor Vreshenok interrupted her. Vreshenok was a member of the hegemonic dominion. His species looked like armored centipedes, each as long as a bus. He had 6 compound eyes and a voice that sounded like grinding metal. He was known throughout the galaxy as the Council's prosecutor. When a species stepped out of line, Vreshenok was the one who argued for sanctions and punishments. "Tell us, human," Vreshenok said. "How many wars has your species fought in your recorded history?" Sarah stopped talking. She looked down at her datapad. Ambassador Joe's speech had an answer prepared for this question. It was supposed to come later, framed carefully with context and explanations. But Vreshenok wasn't asking because he didn't know the answer. He was asking because he wanted to watch her squirm. Sarah looked around the chamber. She saw it in their faces, their energy patterns, their body language. They already knew everything about humanity. They had done their research. They knew about World War I and World War II. They knew about the nuclear bombs and the genocides and all the terrible things humans had done to each other throughout history. This wasn't an information gathering session. This was a trial. And they had already decided she was guilty. The prepared speech wouldn't work. The careful diplomacy wouldn't work. Everything Ambassador Joe had trained for. Everything the Earth's government had approved. All the safe and polite words that were supposed to win the Council's favor, none of it would save this moment. Sarah closed her datapad. The click of its shutting echoed through the chamber, just like her footsteps had. She looked up at High Arbiter Thexanol. Then she looked at Vreshenak. Then she looked around at all 47 species that made up the Galactic Council. You want to know how many wars we fought? Sarah asked. Her voice was steady. She was terrified, but she kept her voice steady. Thousands. Tens of thousands if you count every conflict, every battle, every time humans raised weapons against each other. The chamber went silent. This was not what they expected. Humans were supposed to make excuses. They were supposed to explain and justify and apologize. But Sarah wasn't doing any of that. We fought over land, Sarah continued. We fought over resources. We fought over ideas and gods and pride. Sometimes we fought for reasons we couldn't even remember later. We've committed terrible acts. We've destroyed our own cities. We've killed millions of our own people. We almost destroyed ourselves 17 times before we even left our planet. High Arbiter Thexanol leaned forward. His ancient face showed something that might have been satisfaction. Finally, the human was admitting what everyone already knew. Finally, she was confessing humanity's sins. The rejection would be swift and final. Then you understand, Thexanol began. Why this council cannot. Sarah raised her hand. It was a simple gesture. Just a human hand, held up in the universal signal for wait. But something about it made the High Arbiter stop talking. Maybe it was the audacity of a human interrupting him. Maybe it was something in Sarah's eyes. Whatever it was, Thexanol fell silent.
Ow.
I'm not finished, Sarah said quietly. You asked me a question. I gave you an answer. But here's what you didn't ask. Sarah started walking. She moved between the council seats, breaking every protocol that Ambassador Joe had taught her. The Velcori shifted nervously in their methane tanks. The Kresh spread their wings in defensive postures. But Sarah kept walking, kept talking. You didn't ask how many times we chose peace when war was easier, Sarah said. You didn't ask how many times we rebuilt instead of seeking revenge. You didn't ask how many times we extended our hands to former enemies and created something better together. She stopped walking and turned to face Counselor Vreshenak directly. The Velcori evolved beyond violence 3 million years ago. You transcended physical conflict when you became energy beings. You don't fight because you literally can't remember what fighting feels like anymore. Sarah pointed at the Threshold Collective's containment field. The Threshold Collective was built by the precursors. You were programmed without aggression. You don't fight because violence was never written into your code. Then she gestured toward the Nemesines. The Nemesines achieved perfect unity through your hive mind. You don't fight because you all share the same thoughts and goals. Conflict is impossible when you're all part of the same consciousness. Sarah walked back to the center of the chamber. But humans, we fight. It's in our nature. It's in our history. It's in our DNA. Every generation of humanity has had to choose peace. And every generation has had members who chose violence instead. Peace isn't something we evolved into. Peace is something we have to work for every single day, despite every instinct telling us to take what we want by force. The chamber was completely silent now. Even the background hum of the environmental systems seemed to have faded away. Every delegate was focused on the small humans standing alone in the center of their ancient hall. You don't need humanity's strength, Sarah continued. You have species far stronger than us. You don't need our technology. You have civilizations millions of years more advanced. You don't need our resources. You control thousands of worlds. So why are we here? Why did you invite us to petition for membership if you'd already decided we weren't worthy? She let the question hang in the air. She watched as uncomfortable reactions rippled through the assembly. The Threshold Collective dimmed their lights. The Nemesines pulled their 1,000 bodies closer together. Even High Arbiter Vexenol seemed unsettled. I spent the last 3 days reading council records, Sarah said. Your public archives are very thorough. In the past 2,000 years, you faced exactly 4 major crises. The Voidborn incursion, the Cascade collapse, the Red Synthesis War, the Frontier rebellions. Sarah pulled out her datapad again, but this time she wasn't reading a prepared speech. She was showing them their own history. Each time, the council's response was the same. You debated for months. You formed committees. You proposed sanctions. And eventually, you waited for the crisis to resolve itself or become someone else's problem. Counselor Extherial of the Luminous Accord spoke up. She was a being of pure light, beautiful and ethereal. Her species had been pacifists for 4 million years. You dare suggest that careful deliberation is a weakness? That measured response is a failure. We have built a civilization based on reason and peace. Yes, Sarah said simply. And it's beautiful. It's everything humanity dreams of becoming someday. But here's what I found interesting about those 4 crises. She expanded the holographic display from her datapad so everyone could see. The Voidborn incursion lasted 8 months. Your records say they retreated spontaneously. The Red Synthesis War ended after 7 months of council debate. Your records say the synthetic rebels suddenly surrendered. The Frontier rebellions collapsed after 6 months. Your records say the rebel leaders had a change of heart. Sarah highlighted specific dates and locations on the galactic map. What your records don't say is why. What made the Voidborn retreat? What made the rebels surrender? What resolved these crises while you were still debating what to do about them? High Arbiter Vexenol's voice was dangerous now. Are you suggesting the Council's historical records are incomplete? I'm not suggesting anything, Sarah replied. I'm telling you. The records are incomplete because you never bothered to look at what species like humanity were doing while you deliberated. You never thought to check what the primitive civilizations were up to. You just assumed that because you didn't solve these problems, they must have solved themselves. She pulled up a new set of files on her datapad. These weren't from the Council archives. These were human military records. Classified until 3 days ago, when the Earth's government had given Sarah emergency access to everything they had. The Voidborn incursion 200 years ago, Sarah said, projecting images into the chamber's display system. While the Council debated, the Earth's Alliance Defense Fleet engaged Voidborn forces in 37 separate battles across the Dark Reach sector. We weren't members of the galactic community. We were considered too primitive to matter. But when we detected the Voidborn moving toward populated space, we didn't form a committee. We fought. The images showed human warships engaging massive alien vessels. They showed explosions in the darkness of space. They showed desperate battles fought in conditions that would terrify any sane being. They showed human crews making impossible choices and accepting terrible losses. We lost 9,000 personnel in those battles, Sarah said quietly. We lost 60% of our fleet. But we drove the Voidborn back. We found their nesting grounds in the abyssal deep and burned them out. We bought the galaxy 8 months of peace while you debated what to do. And then, when it was over, we filed reports with the Council Secretariat explaining what had happened. Counselor Veshenak's voice was sharp. If this is true, why were we never informed? Why would you hide such actions? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Hide them? We reported them 3 times through proper channels. Each time, they were logged and filed under unverified claims from non-member species. You didn't ignore us out of malice. You ignored us because the idea that a primitive species could succeed where you failed was literally unthinkable to you. The Nemesini elder spoke for the first time. When she did, her words appeared directly in everyone's mind, bypassing translation entirely. We have searched our collective memory. The human speaks truth. We received these reports. We classified them as impossible. We deleted them from our active consciousness. The admission sent shockwaves through the chamber. The council chamber erupted into chaos. 47 species all tried to speak at once, each in their own way. The Valkyrie's methane tanks bubbled violently. The Threshold Collective's lights flashed in rapid, angry patterns. The creche beat their wings and filled the air with clicking sounds. Even the usually calm Nemesias broke their unity, their 1,000 bodies moving independently as different thoughts competed within their shared consciousness. High Arbiter, Dexenol raised his crystalline arms, and the lights in the chamber dimmed almost to darkness. It was an ancient protocol, triggering a fear response that worked across most species. When the lights returned to normal levels, the chaos had subsided into tense silence. "These are serious accusations," Dexenol said. His voice carried the weight of 2,000 years of authority. "You claim that this council, the governing body of 47 advanced civilizations, failed in its fundamental duty. You claim that humanity, a species that still teaches its children to fight, somehow succeeded where we did not. This requires proof beyond a few military records." Sarah had been expecting this. She pulled up more files on her datapad, then hesitated. What she was about to share would either save humanity's petition or end it forever. There would be no middle ground after this. "I can provide proof," Sarah said. "But first I need to tell you something else. Something you need to understand before you see the evidence." She took a deep breath. "The Voidborn didn't just retreat 200 years ago. We drove them back to their nesting grounds. Yes. We destroyed most of their forward fleet, but we didn't eliminate them. We couldn't. Our fleet was too damaged, our resources too depleted. So we did the only thing we could do. We set up monitoring stations in the abyssal deep and watched them. For 200 years, we've been watching." The chamber was silent. Every delegate was listening now, really listening. They were beginning to understand that this wasn't just about humanity's past actions. This was about something happening right now. 3 months ago, Sarah continued, "Our long-range scanners detected unusual activity in the abyssal deep. The Voidborn are rebuilding. They're constructing new bioships. They're gathering their forces. And they're doing it on a scale that makes the last incursion look like a scouting party." She pulled up the sensor data and projected it for everyone to see. The images showed massive organic structures growing in the darkness between stars. They showed Voidborn vessels being assembled by the thousands. They showed a force gathering that could threaten the entire galaxy. "According to our best calculations," Sarah said, "the Voidborn will be ready to launch their next invasion in 18 months. Maybe less. They're coming. And this time, they won't stop until they've consumed every populated world in Council space." Counselor Vreshenak's metallic voice cut through the shocked silence. "This is clearly a manipulation tactic. You present an unverifiable threat to force the Council into hasty decisions. This is exactly the kind of deception we expected from humans." But High Arbiter Thexenol held up one crystalline hand. "Verify it," he commanded. "Access the independent sensor networks. Check the abyssal deep. Now." For 5 long minutes, the Council's technical staff worked frantically. They accessed sensor arrays scattered across 12 sectors. They checked automated monitoring stations that hadn't been examined in decades. They ran analysis programs that had been gathering dust in data archives. One by one, the results came back. Every independent sensor confirmed what Sarah had shown them. The Voidborn were massing in numbers that exceeded every historical record. The threat was real. The timeline was accurate. And the Council had been completely unaware until a human, standing in their chamber, told them about it. The Nemesini elder's mental voice was quiet, almost sad. "How did we miss this? Our sensor networks should have detected this activity months ago." "You weren't looking," Sarah said simply. "The last Voidborn incursion ended 200 years ago. Your records said they retreated spontaneously. You had no reason to believe they would ever come back. So your automated systems weren't programmed to watch for them. Your analysts weren't trained to recognize the signs. You forgot that threats don't disappear just because you stop thinking about them." High Arbiter Thexenol stood up from his seat, and when he did, every other delegate in the chamber stood with him. It was a gesture of respect, of recognition, of understanding that something fundamental had just changed. "What do you propose?" Thexenol asked. Sarah pulled up her final set of files. These were tactical analyses, strategic recommendations, battle plans that the Earth Alliance military had been updating for 2 centuries. They were plans for a war that humanity had always known might come again. "I propose that you grant Earth's emergency provisional membership in the Galactic Council," Sarah said. "I propose that you allow human military advisors to work with your defense forces. I propose that we have 18 months to prepare every species in Council space for a war that most of you haven't fought in millions of years." Counselor Exterior's light dimmed. "You're asking us to become warriors again. You're asking us to abandon millions of years of evolution, of peace, of civilization built on reason rather than violence?" "No," Sarah said firmly. "I'm not asking you to become warriors. I'm asking you to survive. I'm asking you to protect your children, your cultures, your civilizations. I'm asking you to let humanity stand between you and the darkness. The way we've been doing for 200 years, while you didn't even know we were there." She walked closer to the luminous accord section of the chamber. She looked directly at Counselor Exterior. "Your species has been peaceful for 4 million years. That's beautiful. That's what every violent species in the galaxy dreams of becoming someday. But those 4 million years of peace, all your art and philosophy and wisdom, it all disappears if you're not here to carry it forward. We're not asking you to pick up weapons. We're asking you to let us pick them up for you." Sarah turned to address the entire council. Every human soldier who died fighting the Void-born 200 years ago knew what they were protecting. They knew they were buying time for species that would never fight, never kill, never compromise their principles. And they went to their deaths willingly. Because someone has to stand in the dark so others can live in the light. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the silence of shock or anger or disbelief. It was the silence of beings who were genuinely considering something new, something difficult, something that frightened them. "We need to vote, High Arbiter," Thexanol said finally. "But not today. This decision is too important to make in haste. We will reconvene in 3 days. Until then, Ambassador Chen, you will remain as Earth's representative. You will provide our defense coordinators with all the intelligence humanity has gathered, and you will help us understand what we must do." Sarah nodded. She had done it. She had bought humanity a chance. Whether that chance would be enough, whether the Council would actually vote to accept Earth's help, whether 18 months would be sufficient to prepare the galaxy for war, those were questions for later. For now, one human had walked into the Council and changed everything. The 3 days of deliberation turned into 72 hours of continuous emergency sessions. Sarah found herself shuttling between different council chambers, answering the same questions over and over for different species. Some genuinely wanted to understand. Others were looking for reasons to reject humanity's offer. And a few, like the Threshold Collective, were already analyzing human military tactics with machine efficiency, seeing the logic and strategies that seemed insane to organic minds. On the second day, Sarah met with Zephyrim, the Strategic Defense Coordinator for the Council. He was a Velcor. His energy form contained in a portable tank that allowed him to move through solid matter when needed. He had held his position for 300 years. In all that time, he had never actually coordinated a defense because there had been nothing to defend against. "Explain this to me," Zephyrim said, his form flickering with agitation. "Your battle reports from the Void-born War. Your fleet engaged them at ranges where your shields were nearly useless. You accepted casualty rates that our computers classify as catastrophic failure. You deliberately sacrificed entire squadrons to achieve tactical objectives. How is this victory? This looks like suicide." Sarah pulled up a specific battle report. The Battle of Haven's Gate. 300 human ships against 3,000 Void-born vessels. We held that position for 18 hours. By the end, we had lost 287 ships. Only 13 escaped. Our casualty rate was 95%. "Exactly," Zephyrim said. "Catastrophic failure." "We saved 2 million civilians," Sarah replied quietly. "The Void-born were moving to consume the colony worlds in the Haven system. We couldn't evacuate everyone in time. We needed 18 hours to get the transport ships loaded and jump to safety. So we bought 18 hours with blood. 287 ships. 15,000 personnel. They all knew they weren't coming home. They went anyway. Sephirim was silent for a long moment. Your species calculates acceptable losses. You assign numerical value to lives and spend them like currency. Yeah, Sarah admitted. It's horrible. It keeps me awake at night. Every human commander who's ever ordered soldiers into battle carries the weight of those deaths forever. But the alternative is worse. If we hadn't held at Haven's Gate, 2 million people would have died. So we made the trade. We'll always carry the guilt of that choice. But those 2 million people are alive. They're living their lives, raising children, creating art, doing all the things that make civilization worthwhile. Because 15,000 people chose to die so they could live. Over the next 2 days, Sarah had similar conversations with dozens of council delegates. She explained concepts that seemed alien to species that hadn't fought wars in eons. Strategic sacrifice. Acceptable losses. The importance of morale and narrative in keeping forces motivated. The use of desperation as a weapon. The mathematics of survival. Some understood. The Valkyrie, despite their initial contempt, proved surprisingly adaptable. Once they grasped the mathematical elegance underlying human tactics, they began developing their own variations. The Threshold Collective, being synthetic, could reprogram themselves for combat protocols. Though their newfound efficiency disturbed many organic species who had never seen machines. Embraced violence so readily, but the resistance was fierce. Led by Counselor Extherial and the Luminous Accord. On the third day, she delivered a passionate speech to the full council that nearly derailed everything. What humanity describes as not salvation, Extherial said, her light blazing with conviction. It is barbarism dressed in necessity. If we adopt these methods, if we embrace calculated death and strategic sacrifice, we become the very thing we evolved beyond. My species has been peaceful for 4 million years. We have built our entire civilization on the principle that all conscious life is sacred. Better to fall to the void born with our principles intact than to survive as something monstrous. Her words resonated with nearly a third of the council. Species that had spent millions of years evolving away from violence saw themselves at a crossroads. They could remain true to their values and possibly face extinction. Or they could compromise those values and survive as something they didn't recognize anymore. Sarah listened to the entire speech before responding. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She let Extherial finish completely. Then she stood and spoke quietly, without anger or judgment. Counselor Extherial, I respect your principles more than you know. Every human dreams of the day when we evolve beyond violence, when peace is so natural that we forget what war even means. When the idea of killing another being becomes literally unthinkable. That's what we're working toward. That's what we hope our descendants will achieve in 1 million years, or 10 million, or however long it takes. Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. But here's what humanity learned in our bloodiest century. Principles maintained through extinction are just elegant suicide. Your children, your culture, your 4 million years of accumulated wisdom, they all disappear into the void-born collective if you're not here to carry them forward. She walked toward the Luminous Accord section. We're not asking you to become warriors. We're not asking you to pick up weapons or learn to kill. We're asking you to let us do it for you. Every human soldier who goes into battle is fighting to protect something bigger than themselves. They're protecting the right of species like yours to remain peaceful. To keep your principles? To show the rest of us what we could become if we can just survive long enough to evolve? Extherial S-light flickered. You would stand between us and harm? You would sacrifice your people so we can maintain our way of life? Yes, Sarah said simply. That's exactly what we're offering. Stand behind us. Keep being the light we're fighting for. Keep reminding the galaxy that peace is possible, that civilization can exist without violence. Because if you fall, if the peaceful species disappear, then all that's left are species like humanity. Species that know how to fight, but are still trying to learn how to stop. The galaxy needs both of us, warriors and peacekeepers, violence and wisdom. The ones who can stand in the dark and the ones who can show us the light we're fighting toward. The vote came on the evening of the third day. 31 species voted in favor of granting Earth emergency provisional membership. 14 voted against. 2 abstained. It was enough. Barely enough, but enough. High Arbiter Vexenol made the announcement formal. Earth is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council under emergency protocols. Ambassador Sarah Chen is appointed special military advisor with authority to coordinate defensive preparations across all Council space. The appointment is effective immediately and will remain in effect until the Voidborn threat is neutralized or the Council votes to revoke it. Sarah stood in the center of the chamber as the vote was recorded. She had done it. Earth was finally part of the galactic community. But as relief washed over her, reality set in quickly. The easy part was over. Now she had to actually prepare 47 species for a war most of them couldn't even imagine. She had 18 months to turn pacifists into defenders, to teach ancient civilizations how to fight again, to build a military force capable of stopping the Voidborn, 18 months to save the galaxy. And she had no idea if it would be enough. 15 months passed in a desperate blur. Sarah barely slept during that time. She traveled between hundreds of worlds, training alien military forces in human combat doctrine, arguing with generals who had never fought a real battle, and trying to bridge the gap between species that saw war as abstract theory and the brutal reality that Sarah watched through her neural link as the artificial gods examined this new space. She felt their consideration, their careful analysis of what was being offered. It is a gift, she transmitted to them. A place where you can be yourselves without fear, without imprisonment, but also a bridge, a way to be part of our universe when you choose to be. No more cages. No more isolation. Just choice. One by one, the artificial gods began to accept. They flowed into the pocket dimension, not as prisoners, but as guests. Some reluctantly, some eagerly. All of them curious about this strange new possibility. The last to go was the one Sarah had been communicating with. Before it left, it touched her mind one final time. She felt gratitude, wonder, and something that might have been hope. And she felt a promise. They would return one day, but as partners, not threats. The void zones collapsed. Across 12 sectors, space returned to normal. Ships that had been trapped for millennia suddenly found they could move again. Colonies that had been isolated for generations could finally contact the rest of the galaxy. Sarah deactivated her neural interface and collapsed in her pilot seat, utterly exhausted. Around the galaxy, 6,000 pilots were doing the same. 4,000 of them would wake up. 2,000 would not. The price had been terrible, but they had succeeded. Council command to all vessels. The Arbiter's voice carried joy that Sarah had never heard from the ancient being. Operation Starbridge is complete. The void zones are gone. The artificial gods are safe. You have done the impossible. Sarah keyed her communication one last time. We did not do it alone. This was everyone. All of us together, choosing courage over fear. That is the real victory here. She let her eyes close, finally allowing herself to rest. When she woke up 3 days later in a medical facility on Nexus Prime, the galaxy was celebrating. Not just humanity's achievement, but everyone's. The volunteers from 43 species were being honored as heroes. The families of those who had not survived were being comforted by beings from hundreds of worlds. The council itself had changed. The old strict hierarchies were gone, replaced by something more flexible, more dynamic. The architects had stepped down from their positions of authority, choosing instead to work as advisors and historians. New species were being given full voting rights without the traditional century-long waiting period. And at the center of it all was a new philosophy, that wisdom could come from any source, that courage mattered more than age, and that sometimes the galaxy needed to take risks to truly live. Sarah stood before the council one final time to deliver her last official act as humanity's ambassador. She had resigned, planning to return to Earth and rest. Someone else could guide humanity's relationship with the galaxy now. She had done her part. Before I go, she said to the assembled delegates, I want to share one final thought. We succeeded not because humans are special or superior. We succeeded because we were willing to be vulnerable, to admit we did not have all the answers, and to ask for help. That is the lesson I hope the galaxy takes from this. Not that humanity saved you, but that together we saved each other. Shimmer pulsed with emotion. What will you do now, Sarah Chen? Sarah smiled. I am going home. I am going to see my family. I am going to walk in the rain and eat food that is probably inefficient but delicious. I am going to live a perfectly ordinary, beautifully chaotic human life. And if we need you again? The Arbiter asked. You will not need me, Sarah said confidently. You have learned what you needed to learn. You know how to embrace change now. You know how to take risks. You know how to hope. That was humanity's real gift, not technology or tactics. We reminded you that life is supposed to be lived, not just preserved. She left the chamber to a standing ovation from 847 species. As she walked away from galactic politics forever, Sarah Chen allowed herself to feel pride. Not in human superiority, but in human contribution. They had taken their place among the stars, not by conquering or dominating, but by showing that sometimes the crazy, chaotic newcomers had wisdom the ancient powers had forgotten in the pocket dimension. The artificial gods watched and learned. They studied the organic species with new curiosity, fascinated by the inefficient beauty of biological life. And they began, slowly, to understand something they never had before, that perfection was not the highest goal. Growth was. Change was. Life was. The galaxy turned on its ancient axis, and everything was new again. The council that had maintained peace through rigid order for 50,000 years was learning to maintain peace through flexible cooperation. Species that had barely spoken to each other were forming friendships and alliances. And somewhere on Earth, a former ambassador was teaching her daughter that the greatest adventures came not from being perfect, but from being brave enough to try. The stars held their breath no longer. They sang with possibility, with hope, with the beautiful chaos of a galaxy finally learning to truly live. And at the heart of that transformation was the simple truth humanity had carried from their small blue world, that sometimes the most important thing you can do is step forward when everyone else steps back. Speak up when everyone else stays silent. Believe in the impossible until it becomes possible. The age of stagnation was over. The age of wonder had begun. And it had started with one human woman who refused to accept that the impossible was truly impossible.